My sister ditched her wedding, so I had to marry the mafia boss's son. To protect myself, I pretended to be deaf. The guy actually dissed me to my face. Let's just call you Little Deefy. TSK, you're so soft, like, everywhere. Like a big ol' marshmallow. Sigh, you're lucky to get this prime piece of real estate. Later, he got even worse, spouting nonsense because he thought I couldn't hear. Sweetheart, you sound so good. I bet you'd sound even better if I went a little harder, huh? I signed, you're an idiot. He was in a good mood and asked what I meant. I said, it means you're amazing. He even learned sign language for me. Too bad I didn't know. When he came back, I even signed a greeting, the idiot's back. Then I saw his face darken, looking even more sour. Then his lips slowly curled up. Idiot? He said. Meant I'm amazing, huh? 1. Standing in the Smiths' huge mansion, I was a nervous wreck, fighting the urge to bolt. Not that I couldn't, I just didn't dare. Dad's company went belly up, and we were drowning in debt. The only way out was this marriage alliance with the Smiths. The Smiths were mafia. They'd gone legit, but everyone knew they used to be the top dogs in the underworld. Normally, someone at my dad's level wouldn't even be on their radar, let alone arrange a marriage. But, as luck would have it, Dad saved old Smith's life at sea when he was younger. So, the marriage was a done deal. My sister Daisy was supposed to be the one marrying him. But then Daisy heard their son was a gangster, a killer, ugly, short, and weighed a ton. So, on the wedding day, my dear sister bolted. She even left a note. I'd rather die than marry that fat slob. When the whole family was gathered around the note, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Just imagine some huge guy on top of slender Daisy. Seriously, it was hilarious. Robert, my dad, was furious when he found out Daisy ran off. He clutched her note, sending people out to find her while cursing up a storm. In the middle of his rant, he suddenly turned and stared at me, just standing there watching the show. I suddenly got a really bad feeling. Jasmine, honey. My right eyelid twitched twice. Your sister's gone, but this wedding still has to happen. My right eyelid twitched even harder. You'll marry him in her place. I knew it. Why else would Robert suddenly be so nice to me? Ever since Mom died giving birth to me, he usually looked at me like I was a stranger. He only ever smiled like that when he saw Daisy. I get it. He blames me for Mom's death. He didn't exactly shower me with affection, but he never let me go without food or clothes. I got whatever Daisy got. But it seemed like his love for Daisy wasn't all that deep either. I mean, look how easily he threw me under the bus when she ran off. I still don't get why, if he loved Daisy so much, he'd marry her off to a supposed human wrecking ball. But now that Daisy's skipped town, I'm the one marrying the fatty. Hard not to think they cooked this up together. Daisy's 3 years older than me. I just graduated college. Mom had a really tough labor with me. She almost died having me. She managed to give birth to me, but she died on the operating table. I was born really frail. I was always sickly and never went to any parties, so besides family, hardly anyone knew Robert had 2 daughters. So, me taking her place wouldn't raise any eyebrows. I looked at Robert. He'd gotten old, too, with gray hairs at his temples. Okay. I didn't refuse. I couldn't refuse. But I'm so frail and sickly, maybe the Smiths wouldn't be happy with me and would just let me go. Or maybe the big fatty would crush me on the first night. Sigh. My luck is just the worst. After changing into the bridal gown, the wedding party arrived from the Smiths. But it wasn't their son, just a butler. I snuck a peek. No fat guy. I relaxed a little. Looks like this heir wasn't thrilled about the marriage either. Everything went smoothly, but I still didn't get a look at what this big fatty actually looked like. Because the Smiths had a super traditional wedding, with a red veil covering my head. I spent the whole time staring at the floor. During the bows, I did see the groom's shoes. I wanted to look longer, but I didn't dare. After the ceremony, I was taken to the Smith's mansion. When I couldn't hear anyone around, I finally took off the veil. The bedroom was huge and simple, with a big bed covered in a wedding quilt. It was just so quiet, which made me want to run even more. I saw some peanuts on the bed out of the corner of my eye, grabbed one, and popped it in my mouth. I hadn't eaten all day. I'd starved to death before the fatty could crush me. But eating a few just made me hungrier. Just as I was about to stand up, I suddenly heard voices outside the door. The bedroom door wasn't closed. A slightly raspy, cool male voice said casually, "Try negotiating one more time. If it doesn't work, then take care of them." Take care of them? Take care of what? What take care of? Damn, did he have to be so ruthless? My heart leaped into my throat. This fatty was brutal. Okay, young master, I'll head out then. There was a pause, then he suddenly spoke. Someone in the room? Another deeper, more experienced voice said. Should I? Hearing footsteps getting closer, I quickly threw the veil back over my head. In a flash, an idea hit me, and I yanked something off my ears. Everything went silent. I could only feel my heart pounding like crazy in my chest. Thump, 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 like it was about to burst out. I don't know how long it was, but just when I couldn't stand it anymore and was about to rip off the veil, a pair of leather shoes appeared on the floor I'd been staring at. A very faint, muffled sound reached my ears. Get up. I didn't move. That's right, I was faking deafness to protect myself. Though I didn't have to try too hard, because I was actually deaf. I had a really high fever once in high school. By the time I got to the hospital, I was already semi-conscious. They gave me medication, but it reacted badly with the imported medicine I usually took, causing drug poisoning and deafness. I wasn't completely deaf, but I could only hear very faint sounds. Even loud noises were just weak rumbles to me. I couldn't hear quieter sounds at all. Normally, I needed hearing aids. But just now, I'd taken them out and tossed them in a corner. The prince said it again. I still didn't react. Then the red veil was yanked off my head. I instinctively looked up, and then I was stunned. The man before me had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, lashes like raven feathers, long and distinct. His eyes were like polished obsidian, eyelids thin, brow bone strong, nose straight, lips thin. He was frowning slightly, looking at me with a cold, weary expression. My mind was reeling. Wasn't he supposed to be a fatty? Who was this guy, over 6 feet tall, lean, obviously well built even through his clothes, incredibly handsome with a hint of bad boy charm? He was even hotter than an anime character. This couldn't be the heir, could it? If Daisy knew, she'd be kicking herself so hard she'd cough up blood. The man was still frowning. His thin lips parted, his voice cold. Speak up. Cat got your tongue? I saw his lips moving but couldn't make out the words. From his expression, though, it wasn't a friendly chat. I pointed to my ear, then waved my hand. The man clearly paused, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He looked at me for a while, then, as if not believing me, he took out his phone, turned the volume all the way up, and held it to my ear. I did hear a faint sound, but I also saw him cranking up the volume out of the corner of my eye. So he didn't believe me. Pretty sharp. I looked at him without batting an eye. Completely unfazed by the sound. Instead, I just looked at him quizzically. The man thought for a moment, then typed on his phone. I'm Mike. I was a bit surprised he didn't tell me to get lost. His name sounded nice. I took his phone and typed. Jasmine. Mike frowned looking at the name, then typed a few more words. Deaf? Can't hear? Can't speak? I felt like he was being a bit rude, but I had no proof. I typed back. Can't hear. Can speak. Mike raised an eyebrow, looking me over for a moment. Your family didn't get you hearing aids? My heart skipped a beat. I pretended to be calm and replied. I have them. They fell out during the wedding. Don't know where. Mike didn't seem to buy it, or maybe he did. He took his phone and went into the bathroom. When he came out, I was still sitting on the bed. He was in pajamas, tall and lanky, especially his legs. He was towel drying his hair. He looked up, saw me staring, our eyes met. He raised an eyebrow, then picked up his phone and typed something. He strolled over and held the phone out to me. The night is young. Time to consummate, my bride? I calmly made a gesture. Mike frowned, seemingly not understanding what I was doing. My throat was a bit dry. I swallowed and said, clothes. I hadn't spoken much since I lost my hearing. After a while, sometimes I even thought I couldn't speak anymore. It was better with hearing aids. Without them, I relied on gestures. Mike got me a nightgown. Since I didn't feel safe, I showered quickly and came out of the bathroom. I stood at the bathroom door, looking at Mike expectantly. I wasn't going to be crushed by a fatty, but I wasn't ready to be pounced on by a hot guy either. Mike patted the empty space on the bed. I slowly shuffled over. It was our wedding night, after all. I lifted the covers, lay down properly, and waited to be. Well, you know. But Mike just gave me a meaningful look. Then we each took a side of the bed, not bothering each other. But that meaningful look of his made me uneasy. I felt like he was up to something. In the middle of the night, Mike suddenly sat up. Just as I was wondering what he was doing, I heard him suddenly call my name. Jasmine, fire. Was he crazy? Luckily, I have trouble sleeping in new beds, so I wasn't asleep. Otherwise, I really would have answered. This jerk was so scheming. I pretended to be fast asleep and rolled over. That scared the crap out of me. I didn't dare sleep too deeply for the rest of the night, so I woke up with 2 huge dark circles under my eyes. When Mike woke up and saw me, he was startled. He, on the other hand, had slept great and looked refreshed. For the next few days, I was on edge because Mike kept testing me. It made me lose my appetite and sleep. Fortunately, after that first night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. I figured maybe Mike wasn't used to it either. But it was fine by me. Sleeping alone was really comfortable. I'd lock the door and not worry about him ambushing me. After spending some time with him, I realized Mike was kind of a jerk. The worst part was, knowing I couldn't hear, he openly called me Little Deefy. I gritted my teeth and endured it. He knew I could hear with hearing aids. I even told him I needed them. I don't know what his problem was, but he never got them for me, which meant I didn't dare take out my own. Even crazier, knowing I couldn't hear, he'd still talk to me. Even if I didn't reply, he could go on for ages. I bit into my donut, imagining it was Mike. If only I could bite him to death. I couldn't buy the hearing aids myself. I had to wait for Mike to get them. What if I accidentally overheard something again? It was actually safer without hearing aids. Mike was busy all day, though I didn't know with what. I didn't dare ask. Just like that, we'd been married for over a month. My family still hadn't found Daisy. There wasn't much I could do. Anyway, Mike and I had our marriage license. Getting the license was still a marvel to me. I couldn't believe you didn't even need both parties present to get it done. Officially licensed and certified. But even though we were legally married, because of what I'd overheard on our wedding night, I was always pretty scared of Mike, afraid he'd take care of me if he got annoyed. Don't let his sometimes casual, nonchalant attitude fool you. When he got serious, he looked like he could kill anyone. Luckily, Mike hadn't been home much lately, so I'd actually relaxed quite a bit. I even noticed I hadn't been sick much in the past month. I suspected Mike was good luck for me. Still a bit frail, though, and couldn't be in the wind too much. Another day Mike wasn't home. After the housekeeper left, I waited a bit longer. Once I was sure Mike wouldn't be back that night, I was ecstatic. No one could understand this feeling. Mike's parents weren't in the country, so no mother-in-law drama. Life was as carefree as it could get. I read in bed for a while, then decided to shower before sleeping. Just as I was lathering up with shower gel, I heard the bathroom door open. My heart leaped into my throat. The Smiths' mansion had top-notch security. This was Mike's private villa, no one else could just walk in. Besides Mike and me, only a few housekeepers came daily. The housekeepers were gone for the night. Even if one came back, they'd announce themselves. Not like this, just pushing the door open without a word. I knew who it was without even thinking. The shower glass wasn't reflective, so I couldn't even pretend I saw him. The only mirror was behind me, and I was facing away from it, so I couldn't see a thing. The thought of standing naked in front of Mike made me want to bang my head against the wall. My fingers were stiff, not knowing where to go. Luckily, the person behind me didn't stay long and quickly left. I silently repeated to myself, I'm Mike's wife, it's okay if he sees me, it's okay. But I was still furious. That psycho Mike, peeking at me in the shower just to test me. God knows I almost screamed when I heard the sound. Silently cursing Mike, I turned on the shower, rinsed off super fast, dried myself, and got dressed. And Mike, who I was cursing to high heaven, had no idea. Though I wasn't wrong about him. He'd come home, found no one, entered the bedroom, heard the shower, and noticed the door wasn't closed properly. He was going to close it for me, but then he suddenly wanted to test if I was really deaf. After all, it was normal to be a little wary of this wife who'd suddenly appeared, and a deaf one at that. He'd only meant to nudge the door, make some noise, not to peek. He didn't have that kind of kink. If Jasmine heard it, she'd react, proving she wasn't deaf. But he ended up pushing the door too hard, and it made a pretty loud sound. He instinctively looked up and saw Jasmine, naked. A flash of white. And Jasmine was still lathering up, completely oblivious to the noise he'd made. Mike's eyes widened, and his ears turned red. The next second, he fled in a panic. As soon as I stepped out of the bathroom, I saw Mike standing by the window. He turned around when he heard me. His expression was a little evasive. I pretended to be surprised and signed at him. When did you get back? Inside, I was cursing him out. So he did know how to feel embarrassed. That creep. Mike watched my gestures and my surprised face and probably guessed what I meant. He typed on his phone. Just got back. Me, yeah, right. Tell it to the Marines. Get some rest. After typing, Mike walked out of the room, looking a bit like he was fleeing. I watched his retreating back curiously and noticed his red earlobes. No way, was the mafia prince really that innocent? I didn't bother with him. After tidying up, I closed the door and went to bed. Sweet dreams. When I woke up and went downstairs the next day, I was a little surprised to see Mike. Usually, he was long gone by the time I woke up. We ate the breakfast the housekeeper made. It was pretty quiet at the table. I hadn't even finished eating when Mike left. He even said goodbye, which was rare. Watching Mike's disappearing back, I wondered if he'd taken the wrong meds today. After Mike left, I went back to the bedroom, opened my laptop, and started writing my novel. Yep, I'm an online novelist. When I first went deaf, it felt like my world had collapsed. I completely shut myself off. By chance, I started writing novels and discovered I actually had a knack for it, even made a little money. Once I started writing, I lost myself in it, finishing several days' worth of work in one go. My butt was even a little sore from sitting. I looked outside, it was already getting dark. I was a bit sweaty, so I took a quick shower. When I came out, I was about to go downstairs for a snack when I heard a car pull up. I went to the window and saw Mike was back, with a few guys helping him. Looked like he'd been drinking. I shut down my laptop and went downstairs. The group was just coming in. When they looked up and saw me, they all greeted, "Hi, sis-in-law." From the faint sounds I could hear, I knew they were shouting pretty loud. Honestly, it had a real gangster vibe. I didn't know what to do for a moment. After all, my persona was deaf girl. Luckily, Mike pushed the guys away, shooed them off, and then waved me over. I went over and supported him. Mike tensed up slightly. I thought he didn't like people close, and was about to let go, but then he leaned his whole weight on me. I almost fell over. This guy. Didn't he realize how big he was? He reeked of alcohol. I was genuinely a bit grossed out. But then he sniffed my neck like a puppy. His warm breath on my skin made me freeze. "Little Deefy, you smell so good." I didn't say anything, just helped him towards the sofa. The housekeeper had just left. If Mike had come home a bit earlier, I wouldn't have had to go through this trouble. "Little Deefy, why are you so soft?" Soft all over. Like a freshly baked, fluffy biscuit. Was Mike nuts? Definitely lost his mind. He was the biscuit, a stale, hard, sour biscuit. I finally managed to get him onto the sofa. He squinted at me, his drunken eyes hazy, as if veiled in mist. I had to admit, drunk Mike was definitely different from usual Mike. Usually, he was so arrogant, like he was the only handsome guy in the world. Drunk, he had this contrasting vulnerability that was kind of alluring. It even made me a little shy. I made a sign at him. The corners of Mike's eyes were a bit red. He was sprawled on the sofa, utterly relaxed, long legs casually stretched out. He slowly blinked, then pointed to his lips. My eyes instantly widened. No way. I stared at him for a long moment. He repeated the gesture. I was finally sure he wasn't kidding. I agonized internally for a while, then finally made up my mind. It's just a kiss, right? For my hearing aids, what's a little sacrifice? I slowly leaned towards him, grabbed the front of his shirt, and, under his astonished gaze, smashed my lips onto his. Kiss is putting it mildly. I basically crashed into him. I used so much force, I think our teeth clanked through our lips. It hurt, and I quickly pushed him away. Mike was completely frozen, his voice a little hoarse. "What are you doing?" I frowned at him, full of reproach. What did he mean, what am I doing? Didn't he say he'd get me hearing aids if I kissed him? He wouldn't go back on his word, would he? I looked at him accusingly, like a woman scorned by a deadbeat. An unnatural flush spread across Mike's face. All his languor was gone. He stammered. "If you don't want to talk, you don't have to. No, you don't have to kiss me." Now it was my turn to be dumbfounded. So he meant he couldn't understand my sign, and wanted me to speak. And I'd misunderstood and forcibly kissed him. Unbelievable. This guy usually talked a mile a minute. Why was he gesturing now? So infuriating. I almost lost my composure. The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Just then, Mike grabbed my hand. His eyes darted away. Not only was his face red, but I saw the skin below his earlobes, his neck, was flushed too. I found it rather surprising and instinctively reached out to touch it. The moment my fingertips touched his skin, I saw that spot turn even redder. I couldn't help but stare, wide-eyed, poking it. Mike was very fair-skinned. In no time, the light red turned deep crimson. I was having fun with it when my finger was suddenly caught. I paused, looking at Mike. His gaze was intense, his eyes dark and turbulent, almost black, with a hint of red at the corners. His breathing was a bit ragged, and his voice, when he spoke, was extremely hoarse. "Don't mess around." Looking at his eyes, I realized I might have stirred up trouble. I awkwardly pulled my finger back. Mike, his face still red, asked tentatively. "Jasmine, do you like me?" My eyes shot open. "No, I don't." I knew it. "You like me. Why else would you kiss me?" "I don't." I didn't. Mike didn't care what I thought, just went on talking to himself for ages. I listened expressionlessly. Eventually, I even became somewhat immune to it. He didn't let up until it was time for bed. I never knew the supposedly ruthless mafia prince, the one who could kill without blinking, was such a chatterbox. I finally breathed a sigh of relief when I got back to the bedroom and lay down on the bed. But the next second, the bedroom door opened. Mike stood there, pillow in hand, with a smug look on his face. My bedroom's flooded. I'm sleeping here tonight. I stared at him blankly. Inside, I was scoffing. Yeah, right. Bedroom flooded? More like your brain is flooded. If I believe you, then my brain is flooded. I was so annoyed I couldn't help but make a sign. Psycho. Mike closed the door, walked over with his pillow, saw my sign, and assumed I agreed. He didn't even ask, just totally guessed. He lifted the covers and got into bed. I grabbed my pillow, planning to find a guest room, but as soon as I stood up, Mike yanked me back. Where are you going? I pointed outside, meaning I'd sleep out there. Mike pulled me onto the bed with a tug, his strong arm wrapping around my waist, holding me tight against him. I'm already here. Where else would you sleep? We're husband and wife. Of course, husband and wife sleep together. Besides, nowhere else is as safe as my arms. Don't be shy. Listening to Mike chattering away so naturally behind me, I almost laughed out of anger. Now he remembers husband and wife sleep together. Why was he sleeping elsewhere before? This damn man. I couldn't break free, so I gave up. Like Mike said, we were husband and wife, after all. Sleeping together was pretty normal. I was a normal woman with normal desires. If I really slept with Mike, it wouldn't be a loss. He was pretty handsome, after all. I just didn't know if my somewhat weak constitution could handle it. That's right. My courage had grown bold with lust. I was actually starting to eye the mafia prince. I was all ready for some action, and the guy behind me fell asleep. I wanted to get up and kick him. Now he's playing innocent. When I woke up in the morning, I was shocked by my own wild sleeping position. I was sprawled on top of Mike, arms around his waist, legs tangled with his. I slowly looked up and saw Mike, who had apparently been awake for a while, looking down at me. I silently climbed off him. And started wondering how on earth I ended up sleeping like that. A flicker of regret crossed Mike's eyes. He hadn't had his fill of looking yet. Why did I have to wake up? I got out of bed and went downstairs for breakfast. When the housekeeper saw us coming out of the same room, her eyes were full of knowing smiles. I had no idea what she was smiling about. In the following days, Mike got even weirder. He didn't go out much during the day anymore. He was just home, and I'd see him as soon as I opened my eyes. That's right, he'd moved back into the master bedroom for good. And little Deefy had become Jasmine. It felt pretty good. That night, as we were about to sleep, Mike suddenly said, Jasmine, I bought you hearing aids. They'll be delivered tomorrow. As he spoke, he reached out and touched my earlobe. It tickled, and I couldn't help but shrink back a little, then looked at him quizzically. He typed it out on his phone. A wave of happiness washed over me, and a smile escaped from my eyes. It would be much more convenient to use them. Mike put down his phone, looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, Jasmine, I'll always protect you. I paused, a little touched. Mike had actually been really good. He never treated me like I was just the deaf girl. Even if I didn't speak, he'd finish what he was saying. He was good. I knew that. I patted his shoulder, and under his questioning gaze, I leaned in and kissed him. This time, I didn't crash into him. Just a light touch of our lips, and then I pulled away. I had to say, Mike's lips were nice to kiss, soft and cool. Back in my spot, I made a sign. Thank you. But Mike just stared at me, looking stunned. I keenly noticed his ears starting to turn red. TSK, this silly boy was really quite innocent. Especially since Mike was so handsome, the contrast was really amusing. Thinking about it, I couldn't stop the corners of my mouth from turning up. Mike stared at my lips, swallowed hard, and said in a hoarse voice, "Jasmine, kiss me again." Before I could do anything, he added, "Actually, let me kiss you. Can't always have the girl make the first move." Then he grabbed my hand and pulled me over. He tilted his head and kissed me. Warm lips covered mine. Soft. I could smell Mike's unique, cool scent. Mike kissed gently, but the pressure didn't lessen. Delicately tracing, gradually exploring deeper, our lips and tongues intertwining. I seemed to hear Mike's ragged breathing by my ear. Before I knew it, Mike had me pinned on the bed. He lifted himself slightly, his somewhat bloodshot eyes, now tinged with desire, becoming even more captivating. "Is this okay, Jasmine?" he said, tentatively kissing his way downwards. His movements were slow. I knew he was giving me time to refuse. But I never once thought about refusing. My slender arms wrapped around his neck, my eyes fixed on him without blinking. I reached up and gently squeezed his red earlobe. The meaning was obvious. Mike's breath hitched. He tightened his grip on my waist, all words drowned in a passionate kiss, no longer gentle like before, but with a slight force, greedily seeking out my scent, forcefully exploring every corner. Hot kisses trailed downwards, leaving a trail of red marks. I felt like a small boat in the sea, bobbing up and down, liable to be swallowed by a big wave at any moment. I take back what I said about Mike being innocent. He was a real wolf in sheep's clothing. I don't know which round it was, maybe the second, maybe the third. When Mike pulled me up, he chuckled hoarsely in my ear. "Sweetheart, you sound so good. I bet you'd sound even better if I went a little harder, huh?" I laughed in exasperation and signed. "You're an idiot." The prince was clearly still worked up and asked me in a good mood, "What's that mean?" He pointed to his lips, telling me to answer him verbally. I opened my mouth. "It means you're amazing, good, positive vibes." My voice was already a bit hoarse from all the moaning. Begging for a while didn't do any good. It only ended when my frail body couldn't take it anymore and I passed out. Before I fainted, I was still thinking, just this, and I could handle Mike's demands several times. Was it him who wasn't up to par, or was I too good? When I woke up the next day, Mike was already out of the bedroom. After getting ready and going downstairs, I saw a small box on the coffee table in the living room. I went over and picked it up to look. It was a hearing aid, an imported one, the super expensive kind. Jasmine's definitely going to be moved to tears. Maybe she'll even hug me and cry. How should I comfort her later? Mike's voice sounded from behind me. "Heh. For just a hearing aid, I'm supposed to hug him and cry? Is he nuts?" Mike came over and gestured for me to open it. After opening it, I found that expensive things really do have their advantages. It was indeed very nice. But crying was out of the question. I signed at him. "Thanks, you idiot." Yes. I discovered sign language has its perks. At least when I cussed him out, he wouldn't understand. After all, he used to call me Little Deefy, thinking I couldn't hear. After I got the hearing aids back, I didn't wear them much. After all, if I wore them, I couldn't cuss him out. But I never, ever expected to be busted so quickly. It was our 6-month anniversary. Early that morning, Mike mysteriously said he had a special gift for me. I thought about it for a long time but couldn't guess what. I was quite looking forward to it. Until Mike came home that evening with a dark face. At that moment, I hadn't realized anything was wrong. I was eating fruit and watching TV. When I saw him come back, I signed. The idiot's back. Mike didn't say anything. My gaze shifted from the TV to his face, and only then did I see his gloomy expression. Under my puzzled gaze, his lips slowly curled up into a cold smirk. He said, "Idiot? Meant I'm amazing?" Positive vibes? I froze on the spot, not daring to breathe. I'm screwed. Busted. Mike loosened his collar, threw his jacket onto the sofa, and stormed over. Curious how I found out? Mike said, his face ugly. I fucking learned sign language. He gritted his teeth as he said this. My teacher said I did well today, so I praised him, said he was amazing. And guess what? Mike narrowed his eyes, looking at me coldly. I looked at him, trembling. I praised him, and the teacher said I called him an idiot. You're really something, Jasmine. I didn't dare make a sound. Mike walked over, lifted my chin with his finger, his voice dark. You can hear? At this point, how could I dare lie to him? I nodded slightly but still tried to defend myself. Only a tiny, tiny bit of sound. Mike sneered. A tiny bit is enough. Under my confused gaze, he scooped me up. Then he walked into the bedroom. Hearing the door slam shut, my little heart started pounding like crazy. Purely out of fear. What was Mike doing? Was he going to dismember me in the bedroom? I asked him quietly. He pretended not to hear. He just threw me onto the bed. I got it. He wanted to, you know. I relaxed. What kind of punishment was this? Turns out, I was too young, too naive. This guy Mike was a cunning fox. No, a man-eating wolf. Now I understood why he said a tiny bit is enough. Because he knew I could hear, he whispered all sorts of nonsense in my ear. I didn't even know he could come up with so many variations, so many shameless things to say. If I didn't answer, he'd torment me. Even if he himself was struggling to hold back, he wouldn't let me off. I could only cry and go along with what he said. And Mike got even more excited. He even made me beg him. I wanted to choose death before dishonor. I really couldn't take it. I wished my soul could leave my body. And that pervert Mike just watched me suffer. And even cruelly said, Jasmine, you're doing great. Because of the whole pretending to be deaf thing, Mike was cold and distant to me for several days, even sleeping in the guest room. On the surface, I looked wronged and pitiful. Inside, I was ranting, this guy is so petty. It was winter in the city. I really wasn't used to not having Mike to warm the bed every day. That morning, my period started, and I was feeling listless. Every time I got my period, the cramps were excruciating. When I got up and sat at the dining table, I had no energy. The housekeeper had things to do these few days, so she'd leave after making meals. Mike glanced at me, then silently went to the kitchen. Watching his back, I suddenly felt very wronged. When I felt tears welling up, I buried my face on the table. Because I didn't want Mike to see. Back at my family's home, even seeing Daisy and Robert in their picture-perfect father-daughter moments didn't bother me. So why now, when Mike ignored me, did I feel so unhappy I wanted to cry? I heard the sound of a cup being placed on the table in front of me. I blinked, trying to hold back the tears, and didn't get up. Mike saw I hadn't gotten up. His cold, hard voice sounded. Drink this warm ginger tea. When I still didn't look up, he got a little flustered, a hint of panic in his voice. Jasmine? He said, then directly pulled me up from the table. And then he saw my pale face, red-rimmed eyes, and a tear clinging to my lashes. He panicked instantly. Does it hurt? Come on, I'll take you to the hospital. He said, scooping me up bridal style. It was as if all my pent-up emotions found an outlet in that moment. Tears streamed down my face. I clung to his neck, burying my face in his shoulder. Soon, my tears soaked a small patch of his skin. Mike was going crazy with worry. Don't cry, Jasmine. We're going to the hospital right now. I sobbed, hugging him tightly so he couldn't see my face, and whispered. You were ignoring me. Mike carried me downstairs in a rush, taking huge strides, all the while trying to comfort me. My fault. I'll pay attention to you. I clung to him, not wanting to let go. The throbbing pain in my lower abdomen made me instinctively bite my lip hard. It really hurt like hell. Mike drove like a maniac all the way. We went straight to the ER. After a painkiller shot, I felt a bit better. Maybe it was because my face was so pale. Mike stroked it for a long time. He muttered. All that effort to nourish you, wasted. The doctor gave a few more instructions, and then we were alone in the room. Mike leaned down and kissed my lips. Jasmine, I shouldn't have given you the cold shoulder. I shook my head. I lied to you first. I was wrong too. But Mike said very seriously. Then we've made up. I smiled. Okay. Just when I thought life would go on like this. Daisy came back. And, quite coincidentally, ran into Mike while he was out shopping with me. I saw the look in Daisy's eyes then. Surprise, disbelief. And dazzlement. Because I'd just gotten paid for my novel. I said I'd treat Mike to a fancy dinner. Mike initially refused, but I begged him until he agreed. After dinner, Mike took me for a walk to aid digestion. Winter had set in the city, and Mike had me bundled up like a giant burrito. He was always afraid I'd get sick. Every time I did, the one who lost a ton of weight from worry wasn't me. It was him. But actually, since marrying into the Shin family, I rarely got sick anymore. Thanks to Mike taking good care of me. Seeing a street vendor selling candied fruit skewers, I suddenly craved it. Mike didn't say a word, just pulled me over and bought one. See, that's how he was. Even if I said nothing, he knew what I wanted. Eating the candied fruit, I felt sweet inside. Holding the skewer, I wanted him to try some too. Try it, it's really sweet. Mike shook his head. Looks really sour. He refused to try it, no matter what. An idea popped into my head. Lean down a bit, I'll tell you a secret. Mike smiled but cooperatively bent down, his eyes fixed on me. What secret? Feeling the sweet syrup on my lips, I didn't hesitate and pressed them against Mike's thin lips. My wide eyes stared intently into Mike's. I held it for a few seconds to make sure the syrup transferred to his mouth, then pulled back. I grinned happily. Sweet? Mike stayed in that position for a few seconds, his lips pursed slightly, his earlobes turning red. Sweet. There were a lot of people on the street. Afraid we'd get separated, Mike pulled me back to his side. Let me try some more when we get back. I said deliberately. Try what? Mike raised an eyebrow. Try you, maybe? I laughed and playfully scolded him. Get lost. This guy was so annoying. He was more fun when he was all innocent at the beginning. I turned around and saw Daisy, who had been standing behind us for who knows how long. There were a few other girls with her. I didn't know when she'd come back. I froze. The look in Daisy's eyes as she stared at Mike was one of shock, surprise, disbelief, and even being utterly starstruck. Mike seemed to sense someone staring at him. He frowned, shot a cold glance in their direction, didn't even pause when he saw Daisy, and then turned back. Jasmine, let's go home. It's getting cold. You can't be in the wind too much. I pulled my gaze away, glanced at Mike, then lowered my head. Okay, let's go home. Mike took my hand and led me forward. Staring at our intertwined hands, a sense of panic rose within me. How could I forget? I had married him in Daisy's place. Now that Daisy was back, what was I going to do? My worry wasn't unfounded. The very next day, I got a call from Daisy. Jasmine, I want to see you. I arranged to meet Daisy at a coffee shop. When I arrived, Daisy was already there. She had a smile on her face when she saw me. Long time no see, Jasmine. Sitting there, looking at the expression on Daisy's face, I actually felt a sort of admiration. It was quite amazing how she could pretend to like me when she clearly didn't. Daisy's dislike was different from Robert's. Robert mostly just ignored me, but I still got everything I was supposed to. As for Daisy, I accidentally found out why she didn't like me. Daisy had a habit of writing in a diary. One of her rivals saw it and gave it to me. The gist of it was: before Mom had me, Daisy was the family's little princess. She got whatever she wanted, and everyone doted on her. But after Mom got pregnant with me, not all the family's attention was on her anymore. She felt the difference, grew increasingly resentful, and even wrote things like hoping her little sister would never be born. Because she was afraid everyone would like me more after I was born. Then Mom died in childbirth with me. And because of me, she lost her mother. That made her hate my existence even more. Our grandparents also favored Daisy because she was a smooth talker. They thought I was sickly and listless, and so they didn't like me much either. They even wanted to send me away. Robert didn't agree. Even though he didn't like me, he couldn't bring himself to send his own child away. When I was very young, I also felt my birth was a mistake. I even wondered if I was adopted. But before my maternal grandmother passed away, she told me. Mom gave me my name. She hoped I would have a bright future. She loved me, she just didn't get the chance to show it. Grandma also said back then. Your mother, if she knew Robert treated you like this, she'd be heartbroken. Later, when I was older and in school, Daisy warned me not to tell anyone I was her sister. She always had a crowd around her. But because I was often sick, I didn't make many good friends. My classmates also thought I had some serious illness and stayed away from me. I later found out Daisy spread those rumors too. I didn't understand why she disliked me so much. I also didn't understand why someone would dislike their own family. Later, I stopped trying to understand. Whether she liked me or not, it didn't cost me anything. Anyway, whatever she had, I had too. Jasmine, why are you staring at me? Daisy said, her face darkening a bit when I didn't respond, though she forced a smile. I didn't see the point. I leaned back lazily in my chair and looked at her coolly. Spit it out. What do you want? The smile on Daisy's face instantly vanished. She looked at me with disgust in her eyes. Jasmine, I'm back. I looked at her. And? Daisy's eyes widened. She said, as if it were obvious. You need to leave Mike. Why? Her entitled tone almost made me laugh. Because I'm the one the Smiths were supposed to marry. I shifted in my seat, looking at her quizzically. But I'm already married into the Shin family. Besides, you're the one who ran away. You're the one who said you wouldn't marry him. Sometimes I really wondered how Daisy's brain worked. And she dared to be so arrogant and bossy. If she were a character in one of those historical novels she reads, she'd be finished in the first chapter. That's because I had my reasons. I laughed when I heard that and ruthlessly called her out. Oh, come on. Weren't you just grossed out because you thought the Shin heir was a huge fatty? What reasons? I don't know anything about them. Daisy pointed at me, furious. You're talking nonsense. I didn't. I pursed my lips. You know whether you did or not. That note is still sitting at home. Daisy fell silent for a moment, then suddenly said. Mike doesn't know about this, does he? I paused. Mike indeed didn't know. The Smiths were originally supposed to marry Daisy. Seeing me silent, Daisy smiled smugly. I will definitely marry Mike. Just you wait for the Smiths to kick you out. With that, she swept out. I quickly called after her. Wait a sec. Daisy turned around, smug. What, begging me to spare you? I blinked, looking completely sincere. Could you settle the bill, please? Daisy ordered everything. I hadn't touched a thing. Daisy was furious, fuming as she went to pay. I didn't know what Daisy was planning. I decided to find some time to talk to Mike and clear things up. I'd also decided that if Mike was angry and unwilling, I'd get a divorce. Then I'd travel the world by myself. The world is big. There'd be a place for me somewhere. It just hurt a little inside. I didn't know what Mike was up to lately. He was like a ghost, never home day or night. If I saw him, he'd be gone before I could say anything. Until one day, I came back from outside. It was snowing. I saw Mike and Daisy standing at the villa entrance. They were far away, and I couldn't hear what they were saying. I only saw Daisy talking, and then she hugged Mike. And Mike didn't push her away. Then they talked for a bit, Daisy got in a car and left, and Mike stood there watching her drive off. I watched quietly for a moment, then walked over. Mike was very surprised when he saw me. Jasmine? The next second, he frowned and held an umbrella over me. Why did you go out? You're not well, and you still went out in the snow. Are you trying to kill me with worry? Looking at Mike's worried face, the anxiety I felt suddenly eased. I suddenly asked him. Mike, if I lied to you, what would you do? Mike paused, then his face darkened a bit as he looked at me. What do you mean? Did you fall for someone else? Are you cheating on me? I choked on his words. I said irritably. No. Mike's expression softened a little. He said, very cockily. Who could be hotter than me? After seeing me, you couldn't possibly like anyone else. I quickly interrupted him. You haven't answered me yet. Staring into my stubborn eyes, Mike, though not knowing what was wrong, thought seriously for a moment and replied. If it's not a very serious issue, I'd be angry. I quickly asked. And if it is very serious? Mike was silent for a moment, his eyes studying me. I suddenly didn't want to know anymore. I held the umbrella and walked towards the house. Forget it. I don't want to know right now. Mike watched me walk away, puzzled. He swallowed the words he was about to say. A few seconds later, he quickly caught up. Afraid I'd get sick, he even made ginger soup. He only relaxed when he saw my color gradually return. I stared at his back and suddenly realized, I could never get tired of looking at him. If only I could look at him for a lifetime. Because I cherished these days so much. I never told Mike the truth, nor did I ask what he and Daisy talked about that day. Although Mike's family used to be in the mafia, after they went legit, his parents moved abroad, and their darker operations were overseas too. Mike managed their businesses in the country. He didn't have to go in every day. Urgent matters could be handled with a call or a video conference. I'd asked him if that was really okay. Mike tossed me a line. Then what's the point of me employing them? Makes sense. So, I was indeed very curious about why he hadn't been home much lately, but I didn't ask. Also because I didn't dare. It wasn't that I couldn't speak, it was just that these days were what I'd always dreamed of, and I didn't want to break the spell. Even if it was a dream, I hoped it would last a little longer. But I really didn't expect Daisy to show up at our door. We'd just finished lunch. Mike was about to hold me for an afternoon nap when the doorbell rang. The housekeeper opened the door. I didn't know who it was. Curious, I followed Mike downstairs. And there, in the living room, stood Daisy, dressed all in white. She looked at me with a smug expression. Then she said sweetly, Mike. My heart sank. But the next second, I heard Mike ask, Who are you? I looked at Mike curiously. He was indeed frowning, looking at Daisy with a blank expression. It's me, Daisy. Then Mike furrowed his brow, thought for a long moment. Oh. Something I can help you with? Daisy looked at him, somewhat surprised. What about what I talked to you about last time, Mike? Have you thought about it? Mike genuinely had no recollection. What thing? As he spoke, he even took a blanket from the sofa and draped it over me. When Daisy saw this, her fingers clutched her bag tightly. About marrying me. My heart sank further. Here it comes. But Mike just frowned and glanced at her. Are you nuts? When did I ever say I was going to marry you? Daisy said in disbelief. But I'm the one who's supposed to marry you. Mike cut her off. Don't talk nonsense. Don't slander me. My wife is right here. Daisy completely lost it. I think she just couldn't stand to see me happy, couldn't stand anyone liking me. I'm the eldest daughter of the Whites. She's just a sickly weakling. The Smiths were supposed to marry me, Daisy. Not her. She stole you. You're mine. My heart truly sank lower and lower. I also had to admire Daisy's courage to go crazy like this. Robert really spoiled her too much. Daring to shout and scream in front of the mafia prince, I really don't know who gave her the guts. Was it some pop star's song about courage? Sure enough, Mike's face darkened, giving off a storm clouds gathering vibe. He pursed his lips, his eyes cold. He let out a soft, chilling laugh. Eldest daughter of the Whites? An inappropriate thought popped into my head. Dawn breaks, time for the Whites to go bankrupt. Who gave you the nerve to insult my wife? Daisy felt Mike's gaze was terrifying and shivered. Why? She didn't understand why Mike was protecting Jasmine so fiercely. Mike looked at her coolly. I might as well tell you, if it had been you, I wouldn't have gone through with this marriage at all. My wife is Jasmine, and only Jasmine. I belong to Jasmine. She doesn't need to fight anyone for me. Don't let me hear you badmouth my wife again. I wouldn't mind helping you wash your mouth out with soap. Daisy ran off in a huff. Mike turned and carried me upstairs. Still time for an afternoon nap. I stared at him blankly, a mix of emotions welling up. I murmured, when did you know? Mike put me on the bed and asked, puzzled, know what? That I'm not Daisy. Mike smiled, tucked me into bed, then got in beside me, held me, and explained. I knew from the beginning. Old man Smith said we were allying with the Whites through marriage. He just wanted me to get a wife. He kept saying how great Daisy was. I wasn't interested. Daisy running away from the wedding? That was my doing. I didn't want to marry her, but the old man insisted on repaying that debt of gratitude. I knew as soon as she bolted. I even arranged for someone to send her far away. But I didn't expect the wedding ceremony to actually proceed. Honestly, when I was bowing with you at the altar, I had no idea who you were. After the old man forced me through the ceremony, I left. I never thought they'd send you to my villa. But now, I'm actually quite grateful to Grandpa. At this, Mike scratched his head sheepishly, like a young boy blushing from his first crush. I blinked, puzzled. Then the marriage certificate? The marriage certificate was done the day after the wedding. The old man had someone arrange it, afraid I wouldn't agree. I felt a wave of emotion. The heart that had been suspended so high finally settled back down. Then I remembered what I saw that day. That day I came back from outside and saw you and Daisy hugging. Mike frowned, recalling. The time you snuck out in the snow, right? We weren't hugging. She fell on me when I wasn't paying attention. I didn't manage to dodge. As soon as I realized, I pushed her away. She also spouted a bunch of nonsense. I didn't even listen. I was too busy thinking about how you snuck a kiss while I was sleeping that day. I smiled. I actually believed Mike. But hearing it still made me very happy. Being cared for by someone truly is a happy feeling. Daisy never showed up again after that. Robert, however, did call to apologize. He said he didn't know Daisy would be so willful and that he'd sent her abroad. He also asked if I was doing well. He said he was sorry. We talked for a bit, then fell into silence. Finally, I hung up. What good is sorry? Robert loved me, but not that much. He also resented me. He wasn't a good father. I think I'll always remember, when I was bullied and wronged, he was busy comforting Daisy. When I went to him, he chose to ignore me. Sometimes, being ignored is the scariest thing. In a flash, spring arrived. The city wasn't cold anymore. Mike finally stopped bundling me up so tightly. The weather was warm, and I wanted to go out and play. Mike took me to a horse ranch. A group of his friends were there too. They usually came over to our house for dinner and would call me little sis-in-law when they saw me. Over time, we'd all gotten to know each other pretty well. After leaving the ranch, the group planned to go out for dinner later. I quite like lively gatherings, so I pestered Mike until he agreed. Since we were going out to eat, I dressed pretty casually. On the way, though, Mike looked a bit off. I asked him, but he said it was nothing. Then we arrived at the restaurant. It was large, with a grand piano in the center. The ambience was nice. But something felt a bit off. I noticed a lot of ridiculously expensive decorations. Very unusual for a restaurant. When Mike and I arrived, our friends were already there. We all sat down to eat together. Midway through, I was chatting with one of the girls. Mike said he was going to the restroom, and I nodded. But he didn't come back for a long time. Just as I was about to get up and check, piano music started playing. The whole restaurant quieted down. I had a feeling. I turned around and saw Mike, dressed in a sharp suit, holding a bouquet of flowers, appearing behind me. He looked at me nervously, like an inexperienced young guy. I was stunned, instinctively covering my mouth with my hand. If I didn't know what was happening by now, I'd be an idiot. My mind instantly flashed to that period when Mike was coming and going at odd hours, all mysterious. So that was it. Mike nervously tugged at his tie. Jasmine. We got together so suddenly, I never properly proposed to you. I want to marry you. As long as I live, I will love you. I will always protect you. I, Mike, am your man, Jasmine. You don't have to move. I will come to you. Will you marry me? After speaking, Mike knelt on one knee and took out a huge diamond ring. Honestly, it really dazzled me. The tears almost went back in. I choked back a sob, extended my hand, my lips curving up into a happy smile. I do. Mom, look, someone loves me. The end. The night Mike successfully proposed, he tossed me around like a salad all night long. Completely without considering the consequences. The consequence was that a month later, I joyfully discovered I was pregnant. Squatting in the bathroom, I stared at the test for a long time, then looked at my flat stomach, unable to believe there was a little one in there. Mike had gone to the office. When he came back, I was sitting in the dining room eating porridge. Mike walked over and kissed me. Did Jasmine miss me? I was speechless. We were only apart for less than half a day. Mike kissed me again. Why does it feel like it's been so long? Quick, go change your clothes. After you change, I have a surprise for you. Mike's eyes suddenly turned fiery. Wait for me. I took the pregnancy test to the living room and put it on the coffee table. After his shower, Mike came out, leaned against me, and pestered me for his gift. I pushed him away and pointed to the coffee table. His gaze followed. Then he picked up the pregnancy test. He looked all nonchalant. What's this? He said, flipping it over and seeing the lines. The next second, he sat bolt upright, his eyes glued to it. Then he suddenly stood up, startling me. I watched his reaction, amused. I'm going to be a dad? I smiled and nodded. Mike suddenly swept me into his arms. Then he just kept repeating, I'm gonna be a dad, like a broken record. He only told his family after I was 3 months pregnant. Suddenly, the whole extended family crowded into the villa. Even his parents rushed back from abroad. I felt like a panda in a zoo, everyone watching my every move, even breathing carefully. It was only after Mike shooed everyone away that I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. I still wasn't used to being around a big crowd of people. In the following days, Mike took even more personal care of me. Meticulous about everything, he never missed a single prenatal checkup. 10 months later, I gave birth to our son in the hospital. Old Man Smith said. When I was in the delivery room, Mike was outside crying. As soon as the doctor came out, before they could even speak, Mike shouted, "Save my wife." The doctor even chuckled. When Mike came in to see me, his eyes were red. I found it a bit funny and wanted to reach out and touch the corner of his eye. But I really had no strength. Mike kissed my forehead, his tall frame there, his voice choked with emotion as he said, "Just this one. We're not having any more." I smiled, but actually, deep down, I still wanted a daughter. But seeing how scared Mike was, I agreed.